good afternoon, and why not to say good evening for those who will be watching us soon to this amazing moment that we partake here at the SSB, streaming live for you to bring you more moment, enlightening moment to our lives and to one another, sharing our good vibrations, our good thoughts as well, sending our heartfelt, warm um, uh, uh, virtual hug that is, to each one of you there. And again, to contribute to one more moment in which we come together to share a little bit of ourselves as well. Most of the time, we talk about the speaker, we talk about the topic that will be shared, but it's important for us to remind as well one another that we all can partake on this, whether it is a treatment moment, whether it is a work where we are sharing a specific book, a chapter, or a topic. We can all participate. We can all send our good vibrations to one another. As usual, we always like to start our Saturdays before we pass the word to the speaker of this afternoon into this evening with a message of Joanna de Angelis from the book Happy Life. And we ask that you pay attention to the information that she brings to us because it can be pertinent to our lives in the now and in the future as well. And she says the following in this chapter. There's no title, but it's chapter 23. Avoid arguments. They are always pointless. The side that does not get involved in fruitless arguments is always right. In these verbal jousts and violent exchanges, evils that are hard to repair emerge. The words that anger puts the mouth of a disputant rarely expresses what he really thinks. Rather, they are a translation of his state of disharmony and need to smash his antagonist. Explain calmly and argue serenely. If the other side does not take your ideas into consideration, be quiet and let, which teaches us all without hurry, do its work. This way, we ask everyone to connect with us, connect with our dear Kirsten, who will be conducting this talk this afternoon, to really send our good vibrations to one another as we pray together. Dear Father, Mother God, we ask that you guide us tonight so that each one of us may receive the teachings, may receive the remedies that we are in need of. May the lesson that we're about to study come to us as a foundation for our lives, as a foundation for us to build our homes in a more solid ground and live more effectively, happier, collaborating with one another to help transition this planet from a planet of trials and expiation from a better one to a better one, where we will be able to see some signs of kindness and goodness in the hearts of everyone, not just a few, but everyone. This way, dear Lord, we're thankful for this opportunity, for each one of us who have connected with this message way before it started, this morning, from this morning when we woke up till now, preparing ourselves, working, and vibrating well so that we can all partake with you. We are thankful for the opportunity for our dear friend Kirsten, who prepared this topic, these teachings, and may her be guided as she speaks with us tonight. And may all of those who will be assessing this moment that we'll be sharing here in the future as well be guided so that they can also multiply its fruits. We're thankful, and so be it. So, dear friends, again, another Saturday, another transmission of positive ideals and feelings. And Kirsten today will be sharing chapter 7 of the book Times of Health and Conscientiousness, entitled Possessions. An amazing book by the author Joanna de Angelis, and it's always full of energy, full of good content in order for us to transition into a better life, or if we're already there, to even make it better. With no further ado, I'll pass the word to you, Kirsten. Thank you.
Leo, thank you so much for introducing us. And thank you, everyone, for joining in with this live broadcast as well. Or if you're tuning in at a later time and you're watching this, thank you so much for joining us. Just wanted to give a shout out hello to Alba, Antonia, and Hanita, everyone that's putting in the chat. Thanks so much for just participating and letting yourselves be known. Feel free to share any comments or questions in the chat, and we will try to get to them towards the end of this talk, or we will try to engage during if time permits. So let's get right on to it. So, first, we wanted to say that, we didn't want this to be really a lecture, more of a reflection, if you will. If you can imagine yourself, if you can see the scene in front of you, that's the background of this particular slide. Who knows where it is? I like to imagine it's somewhere uh, in Europe or somewhere like that. But it's someplace far, right? And this is beautiful, beautiful area right near what seems to be like some sort of lake or river, and you're just in nature. You're not you don't have your cell phone, there's no social media, there's nothing. There's just you and nature and just the quiet of it all. And so let's just imagine ourselves there. Let's just pretend that we're all there together, that we're all just seated outside in the fresh open air next to this beautiful body of water. And we're just having a conversation. We're just talking about ideas that really pull at our heartstrings, that make us think and reevaluate how we each are living our lives individually and make us question, how I want to live my life moving forward. So let us try to all imagine ourselves there together. Because when we talk about this idea of possessions, we can't help but feel tethered to the earth. Because when we think of possessions, what do we think of? We think of material things, right? We think of cars, anything that money can buy, anything physical, our real estate investments or what have you, anything that is tangible in our hands, we think of those things as possessions and those things that we possess that belong to us. But one of the things that Joanna brings to us in this particular chapter, chapter 7, it's also talked about in the Gospel according to 13, when it talks about true ownership, it talks about riches and wealth and all those things. In case you wanted to dive more into it as well, we touch on it a little bit throughout this talk as well to kind of merge in the gospel as well and other spiritist books as well. But they talk about, what possession is and what do we really own? Do we own things? Certainly, we don't own people. That's for sure and for certain. In case anyone was, you know, unsure, because sometimes we have this thing where, well, my children are mine, my partner, my spouse is mine. They're not. And so much so that the things that we own, sure, from a earthly perspective, are ours, and we have a responsibility because it was entrusted, it was given to us by God. But perhaps through our own hard work, we've attained those things. But even still, those things don't belong to us. But let's go ahead and jump into Joanna's words because these are not my reflections, these are reflections from her words. But true to every chapter, before we begin, we always start out with affirmations. One of the reasons we do this is the same reason You would fine tune a piano, the same reason you would if you have a guitar and you haven't played it for a while. Even if you played it just a few days ago, you might want to just fine tune it a little bit just to make it a better instrument. So it's the same with us. We are instruments and we just want to tune ourselves to higher vibrations, right? Aside from the fact that positive affirmations are so good for us, they're both grounding for us to find our center as well and to feel balanced and connected, but also allowing us to feel present in this moment and feel connected to the divine as well. And really as a reminder, as a reminder to say to ourselves, this is why I'm here. It's what I want to do. So let's go ahead and dive into her words. And remember, with these affirmations, remember that we're next to this body of water. You can close your eyes and just listen to my voice as I repeat these affirmations. You can just say them wherever you are, repeat them in your mind or out loud if you're by yourself or if you're comfortable, if you're in the presence of somebody else. Whatever you feel most comfortable doing. So she starts out the affirmation. Divine power endows me with all I need for a happy life. Divine power endows me with all I need for a happy life. What I lack is certainly not important. I have no real need for it. Unlike people incarcerated in dissatisfaction, owners of hard earned but useless things, I have the means of discernment for achieving health and peace. I have the means of discernment for achieving health and peace. True possession will never be taken from me. True possession I shall attain. And what is that? What is possession? To have something, to obtain something and call it your own, or to be that thing's owner? Well, Joanna de Angelis in this book gives us a really great reminder and a fresh perspective on possession and possessions. Something quite interesting, she says, true possessors are always the best givers. It's really interesting. Listen to what she says. True possessors are the best givers. Hmm. Let's continue on. Let's reflect about this. Whatever one possesses, one owes. Wait a second. What do I possess? If true possessors are the best givers, but whatever one possesses, one owes. In offering something, one actually possesses it. So let's think about love. Let's think about self love. Let's think about patience. When we give that patience love, it's because it's something that we have inside of us. If we don't have it, we can't give it. And earlier today, I was listening to a talk by Marcelo Neto from Florida. He's part of the Conscious Living Spiritist group in Florida. And he made a comment during his talk, and we really liked it. And he said that, um, "Oh, sometimes I get mad at myself because I lost my patience with someone. But how can I lose something if I don't really possess it? Or better yet, I don't really possess it if I've lost it." So you don't really lose patience. You never had it to begin with. So it's something for us to think about when we use. I know it's at least in the English language, it's just sort of something that we say. "Oh, I lost my patience. I lost my temper." It's just the way in which we say things. But if we dig a little bit deeper, really, if we didn't, we if we were unable to exercise it, we didn't have much of it at all to begin with. Something for us to think about. She goes on to say, in life's accounting, true ownership means the good spread around to provide joy. It is not something to be stored away, a useless resource. So if you think about it, when Joanna says true possessors are always the best givers. So if what we truly possess are all those good qualities, intelligences, all those things, we give those things away freely. Those are those who truly possess those things. And we truly have patience. We give that away. We share it. We practice it. That's why true possessors are always the best givers because they have so much to give and they give freely and openly and naturally, not with probably not even having to think much about it. It becomes a second nature. And true ownership, it means all the good that we can spread around, that we can share. It's not something for us to keep just for ourselves. True gift enriches the giver as well as the recipient. And this is a measurement in which we can see when we are giving truly from our hearts and not from our ego, is that the recipient benefits as much as we do. And it's not just us benefiting from giving because sometimes we're giving out of our own ego, perhaps, or I'm giving something flashy for everyone to see. And I post it all over social media because I gave this great thing. But did the recipient truly benefit from it? And it's truly something only us in our hearts we can feel and experience when we're doing that thing. Whatever it is, whether it's praying for someone, whether it's giving them consolation or an ear to listen to their troubles, something for us to really think about and consider when we are giving. She goes on to say, conventionally, those who scrimp and save will become wealthy. So, undoubtedly, if you know, we can save money, we can amass a great deal of fortune. But she says almost always, however, they grow stingy by falling in love with their assets, thus becoming their prisoner. Let us reflect about that within ourselves. Let's not think about all the millionaires and the billionaires in the world, the Jeff Bezos of the world. Let's not, come on, guys, let's reflect within ourselves. Let's reflect within ourselves, not the extreme 1% of the population. But let's think about ourselves. We don't have to be filthy rich to have this experience. We also can be moderately rich or wealthy and begin to develop this stinginess. We fall in love, we grow attached to our things, to our assets, whether it's our money, our house, our cars, or what have you. And we don't believe Spiritism nor Joanna is trying to say that we should be irresponsible in any way, not whatsoever, because there's plenty of literature out there within Spiritism that says that talks about how important it is to be a good steward of your money because money is neither bad near good nor bad. It's what we do with it and who uses it, as Joanna says, that makes a difference. So we must respect it. We must use it wisely and imagine it always as a gift from God and coming from God. Even though you might say, Kirsten, well, I worked, blood, sweat, and tears. I went to college, or I worked hard years and really hard to reach the position that I'm at. Yes, that is all blessings that have been granted from God. He has allowed those things to happen. So when we treat money in that way, it flows so much more freely and easily because we acknowledge that it's not ours. We respect it, we're responsible with it, but we do not form an attachment to it. It's a very difficult feat to do. Pascal gives a communication in the Gospel according to Spiritism This was communication that was given in 1860. And he says, humans truly possess only what they can take with them from this world, what they find upon arriving, and what they leave behind upon departing. They can only enjoy during their stay. What then do they truly possess? Nothing that is for the use of their body, but everything that is for the use of their soul, intelligence, knowledge, and moral qualities. Those are the things that we truly possess because we can take it with us when we disconnect from our physical body, go back to the spiritual world or spirit world. That's what we truly possess. Everything else is transitory. Everything else is on loan to us from God. But you might be wondering, well, wealthy people seem so happy. Does wealth really equal happiness, though? Does it? I mean, if we look at the statistics alone of celebrities that are wealthy, or celebrities in general that have fame and amassed so many fancy things and cars and houses and all these things back in like the 90s, MTV, I don't even know if it still exists. I assume MTV still exists. Um, used to have this running show. Might have some form of it nowadays, but they used to call it MTV Cribs, and a crib is a house, not where the baby sleeps, but it's just a slang for a crib, for a house. So it's called MTV Cribs, and it would be the MTV crew would go into a celebrity's house, and you'd see how these like super rich celebrities lived, like basketball players, music artists, you name it, Hollywood actors and actresses. So you'd go into their house, and they'd have like 12 cars and like live in this huge mansion of a house, and it was like just insane, and you just see them, they just looked so happy. And it was this facade that people really were just buying into, that we're still buying into, this belief that amassing all these things is going to bring us happiness. And Joanna talks about that there are ways. She says, consequently, there are systems that teach how to save, generating investments that produce profits and opportunities. Those who become rich in this way live in constant anxiety due to the fluctuations in the exchange rate, the stock exchange, and securities. They are poor in the higher sentiments and are victims of financial greed. We can see that. We can see many different arenas where greed happens, corporate greed, greed across the board in many different areas of life. Now, she's not saying that don't invest, you know, don't put money into a 401k. She's not, for those of us who have 401ks or IRAs or whatever you have, your investments, it's good to be responsible with what we are given and to prepare for what comes in the future. But what she's talking about here are people that are so engrossed and so attached to the fluctuations in the market that their mood is dependent upon it, and everything in their life is surrounded by it. She reminds us, as we said earlier, wealth per se is neither good nor bad. It depends on who uses it and how it is used. Wealth easily generates attachment and the fear of losing it. It impoverishes others as it sleeps in the coffers of usury, allowing poverty to become widespread. And we can see this in many nations where there is this huge gap between the wealthy and the poor. And you might be thinking, well, you know, people that have more wealth, it's just easier. We have our money, bills, and you can afford nice things, perhaps. But at least we could say in the United States, we tend not to be financially educated very well. It's not necessarily taught in school systems, and school districts. It's not really taught in our curriculum. We're taught math, but we're not taught financials of finances and how to manage them and what's important and what you should know and understand. But what we do see, and what we allow our children to see, or what our children just see, whether we allow them or not, really, all over social media, is that attaining wealth of monetary wealth, that equals happiness. But research and statistics, and we're going to talk a little bit about research here in a second, it does not show us that wealth equals happiness. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of conflicting research. There is some research that's out there that does show that the wealthy are happy, but they don't define what happiness is for those people in that research group. But what they have found is something very interesting, is that some of the most wealthiest countries are not the happiest. So what we're showing here on the screen is the top 10 happiest nations aren't the richest. And here we have the top 10 happiest countries that are not the richest in the world. Denmark, Norway, Switzerland are in the top 3. Netherlands, Sweden, Canada, Finland, Austria, Iceland, and Australia. And as we can see, the also shown here, is that the United States is not there. And as you see here on this screen, it says the US may have the biggest economy next to China, but it ranks only 17th of 156 nations for happiness. It's probably even lower because this report comes from 2013. Um, and then they give us some tips on how to best invest in our happiness. So, for sure, it's not the richest countries that are showing the happiest rates of their people that live there. It's just not. It's just a fact. Like like we shared, the research is showing many different things. So there's so much more research to do in terms of defining what happiness is, defining what you know quality of life is. Because perhaps having a BMW, perhaps having a mansion, that equals happiness for a period of time. But in terms of longevity, 10, 20 years down the road, we don't have enough data for that. There's some data out there that is showing, yes, it's not bringing people fullness and happiness and peace. And as the wise Winston Churchill once said, wealth, taste, and leisure can bring many things, but they do not bring happiness. It's well said. He was a wealthy man by a lot of means. Maybe not in comparison to some, but definitely in his time in his era in England, he was quite wealthy and enjoyed the finer things in life. But him, along with many celebrities and people that have amassed a wealth, they don't they're not screaming that from the mountaintops. As a matter of fact, I believe it was Jim Carrey that came out quite a number of years ago that said, and it's a famous quote that they use all the time from him. He says, "Oh, I wish everyone could become famous and rich so they can realize that that will not bring them happiness." And that's kind of a, you know, punch in the gut because we're like, "Oh, what do you mean? I would love to be rich and famous." Perhaps if that is what our happiness is, if that's what we think happiness is, by having more things, by having better clothes, by having more purses, shoes, or a larger shoe collection. And they're just physical things to fill up a void within us. And then we inevitably become super attached to those things. And that becomes also really bad because when we pass on to the spirit realm, we're still so attached to our physical things. And it's very difficult for us to connect. And Not just that, but while we're living in the physical world, while we're still here on planet Earth, it's affecting us how attached we are to things. So much so was you've probably heard this story told throughout the different books in the Bible. This one's particularly just from Matthew 19, verses 16 and 22. Is when the rich man goes to Jesus and asks him, what can I do to gain eternal life? And we'll read here in a second with Joanna's words. And what did Jesus tell him? He told him to give up, his things. But let's go ahead and read what Joanna says. When Jesus told the young man who had asked about the means of inheriting eternal life, "Get rid of all you have and follow me," what Jesus told him. He did not intend to establish an absolute principle that everyone must sell what they possess and that salvation cannot be obtained only at such a price. Rather, he meant to show that the attachment to earthly riches is an obstacle to salvation. So when Jesus, because oftentimes we look at this particular uh, part in the Bible, in scripture, this encounter of this rich man and Jesus, and we think, "Oh my gosh, does that mean I have to give up all my possessions and live in a cave or live, in a impoverished way?" And in the Gospel according to Spiritism, and this is the particular text, excuse me, this is part is not from Joanna just yet. This is in the Gospel according to Spiritism in that chapter 16, entitled True Ownership, where the Spirit's explaining to us that when Jesus says to the man, to the rich man, get rid of all you have and follow me, it's not that he needed to just, it was the things itself, but it was the fact that this rich man was so attached. He could not walk away from that rich life and follow Jesus. He could not. He could not give up all those things. And he was sad for it because he had a lot of possessions and was very wealthy. And the gospel goes on to explain what Jesus proposed to him was a decisive test meant to uncover what was at the core of his thinking. From the world's point of view, he could have undoubtedly have been a perfectly honest man who did not harm anyone. In the gospel, they go on to explain he was a good person, he was a good son, and abided by all the laws of the time. However, he did not practice true charity because his virtue did not extend as far as self sacrifice. It was an application of the principle without charity, there is no salvation. So, this particular rich young man, he might have been a good person, but one of the more important things, this famous adage in Spiritism, or quote that we always use in Spiritism, without charity, there's no salvation. That is directly correlated with our ability to self sacrifice, being able to truly give something and be without in order for someone else to have. And this is, if we can think about it on a simplistic level, this is when a father sees his child hungry and the father too is hungry. But instead of eating, he gives his food to his children because he'd rather feed them. And that speaks of a whole other different type of nourishment that the father will receive on a spiritual level for providing and doing that for his children. But can we do that for one another in humanity? Do we do that for one another in humanity? Even in the gospel, they talk about this case of this woman where she goes and she has a daughter and she's wealthy, and there's a question that was posed to her that about, giving a little bit extra to those who are in need, other children. And perhaps maybe her daughter will do without a few bows or sparkly things, but that will mean that another child can get those things who has absolutely nothing. So it is about this idea of sacrifice and letting go, because it's the attachment that keeps us prisoner. And it's that old saying, do we have things? Do we have possessions or do possessions have us? Or do we have things or do the things have us? We have to reflect, we have to think about that. When we are in our car or when we are in front of, our closet or walking up to our home, see how you're feeling. See what feeling comes out of you when you think about if I were to pass on tomorrow, or if a hurricane were to come through now and destroy my home, of course we would be upset because it's devastating. But some would be even more upset at just losing physical things, clothing, shoes, things that are completely replaceable. We need to think about how we feel because that is our gauge. That is our personal assessment to see, am I attached to these things? Joanna goes on to say, learn to share in order to partake better. Whatever you own will eventually change hands, but what you are will remain unconsumed. Ponder the transience of physical existence, and you will understand the urgent need to make use of it properly. So, learning to share so we can enjoy the things that we're sharing, and vice versa with one another. Because whatever we have now, whatever assets that we have now, we're going to be passing down to our children, our children's children, or perhaps even to other people that are not within our immediate family. So it's the changing of hands. That's what she's talking about. But everything that we have inside of ourselves, we keep those things. So she wants us to think about the transience of the physical existence and for us to really make use of the time that we have and make really good use of all the things that we have that are at our fingertips, quite literally, because all those things are on loan to us. Everything is, except we have inside of our hearts, our intelligence, our morale, our moral qualities. We have all those things. She goes on to say, the unstoppable march of time demonstrates the fragility of things before its relentlessness in relation to all that is of the earth. Only intellectual and moral achievements have the flavor of eternity. So when we think about time, time passes so quickly. We can look, if you have children, we can look at our children and they're a perfect example. You could think about the day that they were born. And now, how old are they? Time passes by in what seems like an instant. Or we can look at our parents and think, wow, I remember when, you know, my mother was still alive, you might say. Or I remember when my grandfather was still alive. It seems like yesterday. It seems like time went by so fast that your childhood has passed. Loved ones have already passed on. Times have just changed because time marches on. And that's why we need to be intentional with how we're living our lives, making that self assessment. Because what if today were to be our last day? We don't know that. And it's not morbid to think that. It's not. Joanna tells us we should contemplate death. We should contemplate it so we can prepare in many different ways, emotionally and every other possible way financially and being responsible, discussing it, and being accepting of it, which is not easy. But the more and more we can think about it and digest it, process it, the better we are for it. The better we can come in contact with our own selves, the more serenity we can find, the more acceptance we can find. Because how can we accept that which we are unaware of? How can I love myself if I'm not even fully knowing who I am? The gospel also brings us in chapter 16 some additional advice and reminders. It says, the goods of the earth belong to God, who distributes them as he will, and humans are only their stewards, administrators at various degrees of honesty and intelligence. So we are but stewards of these physical things, as much as we are stewards of our body, if you want to think of it that way as well, which also calls for a responsibility for us to be mindful of how we treat our body. But the same goes for money. Are we being responsible, morally and ethical towards the money that we earn and how we treat money, how we utilize and disperse money and our possessions? Joanna wants us to have these reflections. As a matter of fact, when you look in the gospel, there are many chapters all around this idea of possessions, wealth, uh, attachment to wealth, physical things, what it is to be poor and rich. There are so many chapters about that for a reason, because it's such a huge part of our humanity, of the experience of being human at the level that we're at. So if there's so much information in just one book, not to mention all the other books in the codification and the additional adjunct literature, but just in the gospel alone, there's a ton of information. It's not like one little paragraph in the entire book. There's a plethora of information, which makes us think. If they put that, if this high spirits, if when Kardec codified all this information, it must be there for a reason. For us to ponder and take action in a positive sense. She goes on to say, therefore, amass spiritual acquisitions that will broaden your horizons of understanding of life, presenting you with a better picture of the meaning and purpose of corporeal existence. With a correct vision as to how you should proceed, you will be freeing yourself of countless degenerative factors that have taken hold in your personality and which are responsible for the problems, illnesses, and dissatisfactions that afflict you. Let's reflect about that. If we don't correct our vision of how we view possessions, this material life, we are contributing to our own illnesses that she refers to as degenerative, which plainly means a breakdown. So, disease processes that break down parts of the body, or even the different cells in our body, if you will. Not wanting to get incredibly technical here, because where does disease start from? It starts from us, the immortal spirit, and it manifests in our physical body. And there we can see, if we were to correct our perspective, correct our vision, which inevitably will change our life. We can change our health. Our personality will ultimately be modified. Problems, illnesses, and the dissatisfactions we feel. If we can focus on amassing spiritual acquisitions, meaning, in layman's terms, working on obtaining good qualities within ourselves, working on being a good person, working on having an open heart and an open mind. Or as the Dalai Lama says, an open heart is an open mind. But working towards those things. Because one way or another, life is going to teach us. One way or another, whether we like it or not, through pain or not, we're going to learn. Law of progress tells us we're going to keep marching forward because that is the law. We got to keep moving. Joanna goes on to say, when we correct our vision, remember, this vision of understanding, presenting better picture of meaning and purpose of corporeal existence, when we correct our vision to that, she says, we will no longer fight over trifles, nor will aggressions affect you, for they are of no importance. Your aspirations will be higher. You will not feel more important or less important according to the game of deceitful references of the useless competitions on the earthly stage. Your achievements will not be measured by cheers or jeers. You will live in peace and will have all you need without the unnecessary torment of the superfluous. If we can imagine, what would the world look like if nations weren't fighting and aggressive? If all of us as individuals were to set our aspirations higher. We're not talking about a one world religion. We're talking about at the core of who we are, at the base, for us to have a basic understanding that life is more than the attainment of riches, of just enjoyment and leisure, but it's about becoming a good person and allowing the moments of pain that we go through to serve for our own benefit so we can grow, so we can learn and grow in ways we never even imagined or even thought possible. And before we share Joanna's final thoughts on the topic of correcting our vision and growing in ways in which we never even think possible, I was talking to a friend of mine recently whose young daughter is undergoing a very harsh chemo treatments. And we were discussing back and forth, sharing some words, some positive words of encouragement to her. And one of the things that really struck our heart so deeply was something that she said to us. Um, she said that her faith had grown a lot during this process since the beginning of when her daughter was first diagnosed. And she said she can pinpoint the moment when things changed for her. And she sent me this message the other day, and she said, I remember being admitted into the hospital with my daughter. My daughter was admitted to the hospital. And they're trying to figure out what was wrong with her. And then finally, we got the diagnosis. And it was just sheer devastation for her and her husband. And she said that night in the hospital, after everyone had gone and her daughter was sleeping, she said, "Kirsten, got on my knees on the hospital floor next to my daughter and I started sobbing and praying to God. And I said to God, God, I don't think I can do this by myself. I don't think I can do this alone. I need help. I need something. Please just help me." And she said, "Kirsten, the most amazing thing happened to me." She said, "I felt this weight lifted off of my heart, and I felt this lightness." And she's like, "And in my mind, it was like I could visualize Jesus kneeling beside me, letting me know that he was with me and that I was not alone." And no, for those of you who might be curious or asking, she's Spiritist, not in the least, just another sister who believes in God, who believes in Jesus, and who prior to this was just an everyday Catholic, just a regular, went to church, did the whole, you know, baptisms and all the things that usual Catholics do. But this experience of the most excruciating pain for any parent to sit back and watch their little child go through brutal chemotherapy and radiation, you either are going to get closer to God or do the opposite. And luckily for her, she realized that it was only God. And for us as spiritists, we can say our mentors, our guides, and Jesus to help us get through those things. And this is really what Joanna is wanting us to think about in this chapter before we share her final thoughts. What is this life for? What are we doing here? What is the purpose of it all? And quite honestly, I remember so many conversations me and this friend of mine we used to have years ago. What we wanted our financial landscape to look like one day. Yeah, I'm guilty of that too. And we would talk about, well, we're going to get this and amass this and that and do this and this. And we look back now and we think, sure, great. We're trying to be responsible adults. But having that be our sole focus on life, that's not where it's at. And quite literally, we will have experiences in our lives that will bring us to our knees, begging God, begging Jesus, begging the mentors, begging Bezerra Jimenez's for help. And although nobody likes to be in that position, it's the best opportunity and the best position we can ever find ourselves in, because that's when we truly can connect with what's important to us and what is eternal. But let us share Joanna's final words. She says, "Life gives you everything, provided you put forth the effort to get it. But it also takes everything away. No one can hold on to assets that do not belong to them. May health, peace, joy, work, and self actualization be the rare coins that you need for the human journey. They will open the doors to the future for you on the pathway of immortality, your ultimate and only goal." And that's what it is. Life is fragile. Physical possessions in general, they come and they go. they switch hands. But what becomes most important are all these things she mentions here: health, peace, joy, work, and self actualization. And self actualization is just reaching that apex of our lives, of reaching the ultimate self realization, coming to know ourselves, being at peace, being the best version of ourselves. That's what she wants for us. That's what Spiritism is trying to teach us. Are we doing that? Are we placing those things as the most important in our lives? Let's not think about your brother, sister, uncle, spouse, children in this moment. Think about, reflect about yourself, ourself. What am I placing as number one in my life? Or am I going to have to wait and experience an extreme pain to be reminded of what is truly important in life? These are things for us to think about. Not to be morbid, not to be sad, but to be joyous and grateful for everything, for every moment of life that we have with those that we love, every moment of peace that we can work towards. Those are the things, those are our possessions. That's what we possess that no one can take from us, no one can steal from us. No amount of rust or time can ever change those things. So, dear friends, this is what Joanna shares with us in this chapter. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you go and read this chapter if you don't already have the book. But wishing you all um, a big, huge thank you for listening to me talk.
Kirsten, I think that this message couldn't come in a better time, right? Before the festivities,
Oh, for the
then
holidays,
for the
I forgot about
holidays. I
that.
was thinking about this. I was like, wait a
I
minute,
forgot
this is
about
a
that.
perfect thing. Pretty soon we're gonna be engaging on what to buy, what not to buy, and I'm gonna skip a little bit here, and I'm gonna refer to the last comment, and we can repeat it again. But Paula says that fall is a time least season to ponder our attachments, as its theme is letting go. Very true, right? Because it's important for us to think
Love
about
that.
what are our true possessions, as you brought, the not only what Joanna de Angelis brings to us, but Pascal also brings in the Gospel according to Spiritism, and it's a beautiful message that every now and then when I have the chance to read it, it really brings to us, what's important, right? What are we going to take with us? But to say the least, is as you said, it's important for us to internalize this. It's very easy for us to look at at the MTV show, as you said, the cribs and all those things,
Yeah.
like point our fingers, or a family member. But what about ourselves, right? What's
Yeah.
important? I think the importance here is how do we apply this to ourselves in our lives, whether people will follow or not. It's just something that we have to really let go. Before we get into comments, one thing that I want to, that as you were speaking as well, one of the virtue that our dear Benjamin Franklin used to try to conquer and practice is, and it's actually on his list as well of virtue, is frugality, right? To be frugal, to make sure that
Mm.
we're not amounting, of a great number of unnecessary things. So just something that crossed my mind as well, that is actually one of his virtues that he tried to conquer. And I think it's now, hey, the opportunity is there for us to go ahead and think about it. But as you
Oh
said
yeah.
earlier, all the hellos, for we are, we send our our warm welcome to all of these individuals who are here with us, following us and sharing this moment with us. and saying hello to all of us. So thank you for logging in and connecting with us and sharing this moment. I would like to start with Yasko when she says, "It is not the amount of possessions. Over any few coins, one can be stingy, right?
Mhm.
If we honestly analyze our life, we may recognize we are possessive. We accumulate beyond real necessity."
For sure, Yasko. Um, hold on one second. Bring that back up real quick.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, but yeah, no, for sure what she's saying. It's not the amount of possessions because we can be stingy over the least amount. Um, and that we do have a possessive nature. That's what we were talking about earlier, that sometimes we say, and again, it's the insufficiency of the human language, at least of the English language. We say my husband, my daughter, my car, my house, and perhaps it's just a way of expressing something, but we say my to possess, because it's giving this connotation that I possess that thing, but when in fact we don't. And for sure, we accumulate beyond real necessity. Absolutely, we live in this society, and I was talking to my husband the other day. We were watching TV, and in the same span of about 4 minutes, we saw this commercial for this fast food restaurant, these really fatty foods. They looked glorious and amazing, but I mean, the heart attack just waiting to happen, right? And the following commercial was um, a commercial for medications to manage when you have type 2 diabetes, and another commercial about managing high cholesterol. So we live in this society that spews abundance, and makes it seem like, oh, we should have more and luxurious things, and we get this into our mind. It becomes like a poison that we begin to believe that equals happiness, or that huge globs of fatty food and expensive clothing, that is joy, when in fact that's just filling a void. Because we are immortal beings, we are millennial beings, so we have this need to be fulfilled, but we're filling it temporarily with things that are not going to fulfill us forever.
Very true. Very true. And balance is hard, right? When we look at these things, these imbalances in life, it's just so hard because you go from one extreme to the other.
Yeah.
So it's definitely really hard, and it's so confusing to our minds because we want A, but then we have to use plan B to to resolve the issue that we started with plan A. So
Yeah.
if we can say that way. And then Daniel says, how does one know the limit of possessing material things? And how about emotional possessions? Is there such a thing as emotional possession that may harm us?
Ooh, great question. So, first question: how does one know the limit of possessing material things? In your gut, your instinct, and the laws of God are written in our conscience. We know deep down what is enough. If we sit with ourselves and ask and really dive into that question, us as individuals, we can answer that question. There are a lot of things that our conscious mind, we think as our conscious mind, like as we're thinking right now, but there are a lot of things in our unconscious mind that we just bury down, that we don't want to deal with. But those are things that drive us. So we continue to perpetually buy things. That's why Amazon is a billion trillion dollar business. That's why Jeff Bezos is one of the richest people in the planet, because what drives people? Commerce, buying things, because we are, as a society, we are sick, and we are feeding our sickness by buying stuff. Now, is Amazon useful? Absolutely. Oh, 1,000%. And I think Bezos is doing great things with his money, at least to some extent. I don't know his whole 9 yards of everything, but yeah, I mean, again, money is neither positive nor negative, but it's what we do with it, how we spend it, what we do with these possessions, how we obtain it, and our attachment to it. But only me, myself, and I, and God Himself, and probably Jesus and the high spirits, can really say that this is enough. Like, you don't need any more. Only, we need to do that work on ourselves to make that determination and to be honest with ourselves. And in regards to your second question, Daniel, about emotional possessions, and is there such a thing as emotional possessions that may harm us? Yeah, sure. Bad qualities, vices, harboring hatred. But, you asked this question, but it's much more complex. It's not black and white. So I could say, yes, harboring hatred is harboring negative emotions and it's not good for you. Yeah, sure, that's a fact. But you have to understand it from the context. I once was listening to this talk by the late and wonderful Suli Schubert, who passed away already, I believe it was last year or early this year. And she gave this talk and she said something that really kind of um, that stuck with us about, we, especially when we're, in a mediumistic meeting or if we're talking to someone, let's make it simple. If we're talking to someone that's going through a hard time, right? And they really, really hate someone and they're disgusted with them, and we're like trying to give them advice and say, well, maybe you should forgive them and you should, pray for them and do these things for them. Okay. But let's put things into perspective. And Suli gives this example. Okay. Let's say you have a spirit that comes to your mediumistic meeting and that's really, really angry at someone and hates them and is saying all these things. And we're trying to help them during the mediumistic meeting. We're trying to help the spirit, right? And trying to give them advice. But Suli Schubert gives this really interesting perspective. She says, one time the spirit turned to, the counseling medium and said, listen, if you watched your daughter, spouse, be raped brutally again and again in front of you, and then killed slowly, and then each child after the same, and then watch them do that to your wife and then your mother, all while you could do nothing but be tied to a post, how would you feel? Could you forgive them right away? So, this horrific scene that this spirit produces, or the spirit recounts, and so Lee shares is because, look, let's not be so quick to tell people, well, you need to forgive. Yes, indeed, we do. And I know we're getting a little bit off topic here, but this is important because you asked a question about possessing emotions that are bad for us. So let's also try to have a little bit of compassion for ourselves, but also for others that have undergone severe trauma and traumatic experiences and extreme pain. And it might be difficult for them to let go. So that's just a sidebar. Had to throw that out there. Suli came to my mind, so we definitely wanted to mention her and what we heard her say.
I think this is a great segue to the next question, Kirsten, because when we ask ourselves about in others, very often others, right? Because it's easier for us to apply onto others than to us. This idea of changing overnight, or you must change, you have to do this, you have to. Well, it takes time, right? And I'll read the questions that I posed that it has to do with this idea of time and reincarnations. When
Mhm.
we ask, do the possessions that we have or lack now have anything to do with our past? Does any excess now have it was supposed to be repercussions instead of reproduction, I do apologize, on the future? And or does frugality impact the future?
It's a great question. I mean, for sure. right? We learned that some lifetimes we're born rich, some lifetimes we're born poor, depending upon the experiences we need. But one thing for sure and for certain, when we understand the laws of the universe, and when we understand that wealth and possessions do not belong to us, and how we treat those things will reverberate through our lifetime and many lifetimes, moving forward. Why is that? Well, because the very how God creates things is for us to learn and to grow, right? So if I'm mistreating and I'm misusing wealth and my possessions, well, obviously I need to learn how to not do that. So of course, that's going to put me in a predicament of perhaps in the future life exists or future lifetimes of having issues surrounding wealth and possessions. And that could mean being born into a poor family, or that could mean being born into a wealthy family, but being excommunicated or not giving the funds. It can mean many different things. It really depends upon the intricacies of how that is. And does frugality impact the future? Yeah, but it all goes down to, we ask these questions and they're fantastic. I love them. Um, but, we have to be so careful because we always think, you know, we ask these generalized questions, but each individual is so different. So we don't want, and I don't believe Spiritism is here for us to judge anyone else. If we see someone that's living frugally, um, and to judge them one way or another. So, can frugality impact the future? Of course. Yeah, of course it can in many different ways. If we are super attached to things and we're being frugal, of course we're going to suffer a tremendous amount once we um, experience physical death and go back to the spirit realm because we're so attached to our physical things. But if we're not attached to them and we're being frugal because we realize we don't need a lot to make us happy, that the simple things make us happy, then that's even beneficial. You could be building generational wealth for not just your family, but the families that come after you. So it can impact in many different ways, the good and the bad, depending upon how we look at it.
It's interesting that you say this because we have a mountain wealth for many generations, right? And if we believe that we may, or we will, in most cases, be a product of our own selves, right? I can be my own grandfather, great grandfather, right? And if I do
Yeah.
the right things, not only in the terms of me doing, but what I will present to those around me, and they will also learn from me and how to maintain, to be, a hardworking, group of people. Guess what? I'm going to be in reincarnating in that position. So great a way to explain. I think this is important for us as well. But in general, I think this is just creating an environment of how to use the elements of Earth, right, and what is
Yeah.
given to us. So very well said. Thank you. A good hi here from our friend Bruce Ness
Hey, Bruce.
from Portland, Oregon. It's always good to see our friends from the West Coast as well.
Yes. Hey, Oregon.
Yes,
Always
uh,
love to walk the Oregon Trail.
very like outside country or
Yeah.
state, right?
Yeah.
Um, anyways, Yasko says, I heard Bhutan as ranked the happiest country in Asia where strong capitalist economies are rising. How do you compare the perception and definition of happiness of people in that country, isolated in the Himalayas, to ours with social, culture, and religiosity so diverse?
Yes. During this talk, we thought of Bhutan a lot because I mean that I think at this point it's pretty well known. I mean, as a whole, the way wealth is measured is by the gross domestic product, the GDP, right? That's how most, when a lot of these, rankings are made, it's based off of that. And all that is, it's a fancy way of saying how much money one nation or country has to buy more stuff, right? That's kind of what it is. Um, but the interesting thing about Bhutan is that they measure the growth. Uh, Happiness product, I believe it was. So they measure this level of happiness of these simple people, and it's amazing. I believe there was a documentary at some point made about this. Um, but how does that compare to ours? I mean, it's a different world, right? It's a different world, but you can see that the people there, they value things completely differently. It's a different society, the way in which the people of Bhutan, the way that they view things. Again, it's their definition of happiness. It's their understanding of what true happiness is. I personally believe that it is the closest to the realest, genuine happiness, because it's not about the gross domestic product. Although to some extent those things are important, but it's about the health and well-being of not just myself, but of my neighbor. It's not about greed and obtaining all this for me, but also making sure that my neighbor has enough to eat. So when my neighbor is happy, I also too can be happy. So it's very different from our social, cultural, and religious perspective. Us being the Judeo-Christian and having this completely different idea of how they live their lives. It's something to be pondered more and it should be looked at more. Um, from a research standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, but as a society, reevaluating the ways in which we are living our lives. And that's the beauty of society, right? The law of progress, if you think about it, because 50 plus years ago, when women stayed at home, at least here in America, and that was the normal thing, stayed home, and the men went out and made the money, and the women stayed home, raised the children, all that kind of stuff. But then after the wars happened, the women were forced to go into the workplace, and even post-war, it changed the whole economics of everything. You know, since women came into the workplace, and women being the caretakers mainly of the children for quite a long period of time, at least socially, that was what was the norm. We've seen a huge shift happen over the last 50 plus years on the importance of family being important. We're seeing changes in Congress and laws that are being passed. It's a little bit slow in the private sector, but we can definitely see in the public sector that they're working much more towards paid. Well, they already have what's called paid parental leaves, not just maternity leave. It's parental leave, which means they're recognizing the importance of both the mother and the father when at when a child is born. So these are the things that are reflective. When we see that the society is able to value family and able to value these things, these moral values, then we can see that progress is moving forward. And that makes us really happy when we see that, even though there are probably there are thousands of hundreds of people that don't agree, but when we see new laws being passed that's protecting human lives, that are protecting unborn lives, it's something that we're seeing. Okay, we're progressing, we're understanding, we're giving value to what needs value, and family in our society needs more attention, more value. We're trying to make our family life. COVID changed so much of the dynamics of family for within the workplace. It's forcing us to really look at and realize, like, oh my gosh, prior to COVID, I didn't even know who my children were. And I heard I prior to eliminating my social media, there were a lot of comments and stories that I heard from women in my support groups, that were sharing that they had forgotten about who their husbands were or who their partners were, and they had rediscovered them. Some got divorced, but some discovered, hey, I really like my partner. I was not making the time for my family, or I'm rediscovering my children. I missed this huge chunk of their lives. It's because the type of world we live in. Okay, but I'm getting off on track here a little bit, but it's all having to do with bettering our society and you know working to just become better as individuals.
Great point, Kirsten. If you allow me, Kirsten, I want to just give me a couple points about this because
Yes, go ahead,
it
please.
remind me of a study that was, I shouldn't say a study. It was just actually if I may call it propaganda of, in Brazil about, how wonderful was to, or it is to live in the difficult areas of Brazil, especially it was presented in the let's say more populated states of Brazil, right? Showing how people say, "Oh, this is great. This is a great life. It's okay. Live. We're very happy." Well, to a certain extent, I mean, I respect people's view and everything, but we all want more, or we all want in better our lives in many ways, and that's not a bad thing, right?
Mhm.
The reason I'm saying this is because there are certain results will be a product of the measurements, right, that we're
Mhm.
applying to the study, to the research, to whatever we're doing. So we have to be careful, much like the happiness is connected in our culture, um, to happiness, or happiness depends on how much we can buy, how much we can go and afford today, right? And forget about tomorrow, right? With the consequences. But also have to, and I'm not, the saying that the study or how they measure happiness in Bhutan is wrong, but we also have to take in consideration what you said, that values they will change, right? The how we consider the
Mhm.
family value, for example, will change. And when you bring this idea that, for example, that in the past it was okay for women to stay home, now women wants to stay home as well as to be productive in the workplace, right? And have a balanced life. The same way I think that now males are saying, you know what? Yes, I want to be the provider of the home, but I want to have some time with my family. I want to be part of raising that child.
Right.
And I think this is a great example that you brought, because we have to kind of like, let me see. Okay, yes, I mean, we all agree, especially because we're studying Spiritism, we're trying to live a more spiritual life, that the amassing, the idea of amassing things are not good for us. That also a lot of things are being thrown at us. Sometimes it's like, is this really a great, thing to say that, Bhutan is, they're really happy, that they're, the lack of things that perhaps they may have does not impact them. So what I'm saying here is for us to be open to say,
Mhm.
okay, go deeper into these studies and what is
Yes.
being thrown at us, so then we don't take it, at face value, and we're really criticizing. I shouldn't say criticize, or being critical to say, is this really valuable for me? The same way, again, that a lot of things here in the U.S. are throwing us, like you say, the commercials that you saw, right? Buy this, this is a great food. Is it really good? Right?
Right.
Or is this going to bring us, impact us in the future? So, great point that you brought on the idea of um, work, because about a year or two ago, the company that I work for, they made it equal the number of weeks. I think it's over a month for sure.
6
Um,
weeks.
6 weeks, yes, now for men and women. So it's like
Mhm.
it's a great thing, right? And it used to be like half of it,
2
compared
weeks.
to
Yeah.
I remember taking 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now it's 6 weeks. I'm like, wait, great. We joked about it and all, and
Yeah.
I did have a friend that he went through the 6 weeks, and he was happy, just to be home and be with his wife, and it was actually his fourth child, and he was extremely happy.
Mm.
So it's an amazing thing, and that is progress. So thank you for bringing
Yes.
that. I have one more comment here, by Paula, when she says, "Wonder why intellectual and moral achievements are the only ones cited on page 36 as having the flavor of eternity, as opening the heart to be guided by intuition, and social advances seem likewise."
Hmm. Um, let's think about that, Paula. I think that really is for us to have some deeper reflections about intellectual and moral achievements. That's what we carry with us. What else is eternal? What else do we take with us? I mean, it's an umbrella term, right? It's an umbrella term that encompasses like 101 other things. Moral achievements encompass a whole of lot of things, as well as the intellectual. But those are the main things. I don't think that, at least in terms of literature and reading, Joanna's not going to list like 1,001 things. It's easier just to put them all together under these two terms. But we can think of like so many moral achievements, but that's what we take with us. That's what's eternal, because all things that are physical, we don't bring with us to the spirit realm. They don't travel with us. We can't, put it on a cargo plane and take it with us. It just doesn't happen. Um, and so when she says having the flavor of eternity is opening the heart to be guided by intuition, and social advances seem likewise. Um, yeah, I mean, those are the two things that are eternal, things that are we know in the depths of our soul and our heart. Because remember, the laws of God are written within us, so we know deep down what we can take with us. We know that those things are good, even if it's a small little voice that's very, very small for some, it's still there. And so it echoes. And so that which is eternal helps us to connect to the divine, because we know that that is connected to our immortal selves. Um, I hope that's what you were looking for, Paula. If not, we can always talk off air.
I think so. I think you covered, Kirsten, because in order for us to understand eternity, right, we have to evolve intellectually and morally, right? There
Mhm.
has to be those two wings that are evolving,
Yep.
in order for us to truly understand this. So I think that it's said to, well, I shouldn't say said, but um, the idea of eternity is a product of our advancements in intellectual advancement as well as moral advancement, and we're gonna get there. The intellectual will tell us, will take us to the extremes at times, and the moral will say, you know what, enough is enough.
Mhm.
Right? You
Yeah.
ate too much. Guess what? The physical body now is in pain. So I think
Exactly.
that is, for sure, great. Way to see it. But Irasema says, great and nice talk. We really have to be very aware of what we do with our health, and especially what we keep in our mind. Very true.
Yeah.
And then to finalize here, our dear friend Rosada says, Kirsten, thank you for such a great message. Indeed, Kirsten, I think that I am certain we need to even change how we use our words, right?
Mhm.
For sure, this is a message that sets the tone for what's to come. The August is not August. October is almost gone, and we only have one more week, and the November is here. And because November is that month. Well, let's not forget Halloween next week, right?
Yes.
Where all the candies. That's the
Yeah.
possessions. How much more candy can I
Yeah.
get? And then we
Yes.
have the issues of burning that, and then we go into Thanksgiving, the eating,
Oh boy.
and then right into Christmas, where we buy this, we buy that, we get excited with the commercials. But I want to finish real quick with an example here. This is just to close in a funny note too. I had a customer today. He was actually commenting on this idea of uh, at the end of the year of buying, right? And he's like, man, I remember growing up. I think he was referring to the Sears catalog, where you would get the Sears catalog, at the beginning of the year, like half of the year. And then, as a kid, he would be looking at it and say, this is what I want. This is what I want. And wishing for that, gift. And if God permitted, the parents would go and buy the gift, and he was like, I think it was more exciting of wishing and looking on the catalog than actually getting it. It was really cool, and it was this excitement, and the way he was talking, it was like, man, this guy really and it was right, the excitement. And I think that one thing that he said at the end, it was really cool, that when you got that gift, you would have treasured so well, so much, that it's like, I waited so long for this, and you would have put it to sleep next to you. You would have take care of it. It was just funny, but also it made me think. And then you come and talk about possession. It's like, it is so true. We really have
Mhm.
to give true values to things, to the one or two things that we really need, instead of, try to divide ourselves into many pieces and let the possession possess us. So thank you for your
Mhm.
message today. Any final words? And then I would ask you to close with our prayer, please.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, something that just came to my mind as you were talking, Leo. There's a song by the late, I believe his name is Kenny Rogers. It's a country song. I forget the name of the song, but I want to say because the hook of the song is like "Buy Me a Rose." Um, but anyway, the song is all about, this husband that works, really hard to, give his wife all these material things, her own credit card, fancy house and all these things. And, she'll thank you. But all she in the song, she just tells her husband, just give me something simple, buy me a rose, on your way home from work, open the door for me. What does it hurt? The simplest of things, in life. We get so attached to, even the idea of things as you were sharing your story, this idea of like, oh gosh, that is happiness. Um, because that's what we're bought and that's what we buy into, but it's not. It's not. It's temporary. It's okay to have things. It's absolutely okay to have things. They're not bad, but it's bad when we become super attached to those things and when our lives revolve around those things. And when we forget about the most important things in life aren't things that we can hold in our hands or possess, but they're things that we can obtain through, moral achievements and share with one another, whether that's love, kindness, compassion. Okay, dear friends. So let us move to our final prayer for this evening. And with immense gratitude in our hearts, we turn our minds and our hearts to our divine creator and to the governor of this planet, our model and guide, Jesus. We thank you so much for having come to this planet and left an indelible mark for all of humanity and history to remember, especially now as we are transitioning into that season. May we take this opportunity to draw closer to you, Jesus, to your teachings that you left for us, your undying love, compassion, and kindness. Whether we are the Samaritan in the parable of the Good Samaritan, whether we are the priest passing by the Good Samaritan and forgetting about him, or whether we are like the woman at the well. Dear God, may we always endeavor to be closer to you in everything that we do, in all that we do, in all of our interactions, in every moment of the day. May we use our time wisely. May we take these words from Joanna de Angelis and take them into our heart so we can be responsible and know that you are the true owner. We thank you, dear God, for all of these blessings you've given us in this lifetime. And we pray for all of those that are suffering. We pray for those that are lost in darkness. We pray for those whose hearts and names, whose names are in our hearts. We pray for those who are in our book of prayers and those who cry out to you every day, dear Lord. May those hearts be granted peace and courage to endure. We thank you, and so be it.